my childhood was not particularly pleasant. I was a victim, not of my parents, I would never say that, but I was a victim of the unconsciousness of my parents. So that's undoubtedly true. So there was constant conflict, even violence, not against me, but anyway, don't need to go there. But there was the victim identity. I'm not saying that people don't do bad things to other people, and there may have been people in your life or even in the life of your group of people, your collective, that were very bad. You can look at that and say, yes, these bad things that humans do to other humans, the way I see it, is unconscious humans do it, and this is a manifestation of human unconsciousness. But don't create an identity for yourself out of that really keeps you stuck in the egoic sense of self and in unconsciousness. And it also keeps you stuck in you can't even achieve much when you're so much of a victim. That's a great excuse for never doing anything. I'm a victim. And the implication, now how are you superior? Because we talked about the ego needs superiority. How are you superior when you're a victim? Of course, you're incredibly superior morally to almost everybody who is not a victim. It works. Great. Egos can survive on that until you die. And you can put it on your gravestone. Here lies victim so-and-so. Morally superior to almost everybody. So what we need to then recognize in ourselves is conceptual sense of self, which the humans carry that in the absence of awareness. That's who they think they are. And the sad thing is that many humans carry a very unhappy sense of self. They carry this burden around without knowing it, and this burden they call my life. Oh, my life. It's so very problematic. There's so much stuff going on. I don't know how much more I can take. My life is just so... when I was young, I would have imagined something very different, but it didn't work out. You can either blame other people for not working out, or you can blame yourself. It doesn't matter, it works every time. And so, me and my life, people carry this heaviness of my life. But what is my life? My life is a story that I tell myself. It's memories, yes, things that happened. Maybe they didn't happen the way I think they happened, but something happened. When you hear siblings talking about the same event 20 years later, you often hear totally different stories. So whatever your narrative is that you carry, whether it corresponds to reality or not, we don't even know. But it keeps your identity going. So this is the egoic sense of self, that this is the personality, that is the person, and that is the state of being spiritually asleep. And that creates an enormous amount of suffering in your personal life, unnecessary suffering, because you don't realize to what extent this unobserved mind, this is the mind that you're totally identified with, creates an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering. The unobserved mind creates suffering, and this is a very important point. I'll give you two examples of two situations. One is very relatively, seemingly insignificant, and the other would be a major situation that brings about suffering. A relatively insignificant situation, you always watch out for unhappiness in what form does unhappiness arise in you? Unhappiness is a generic term. It could be anything from slight irritation to extreme anger or deep sadness, all kinds of things. How does it, let's say you get upset in a situation, you get irritated, you get a bit angry, you're waiting somewhere where there's a lot of waiting these days. You're waiting to check in at the airport, but they are so inefficient that the lineup is not, it's just moving. Why can't they have more intelligent people dealing with this? Why can't they train their people better? I've had enough of this airline. Never again I'm going to fly with them. This is just becoming awful, just unbearable. What am I even doing here? It's nothing. You become unhappy because you're standing there. Now, the interesting thing is if you investigate, how does the unhappiness arise, and you really look at it, then you may want to ask yourself, okay, but where is the unhappiness? What is it that causes it? How would I experience this situation? This is the experiment that I recommend when you are getting irritated. Anywhere where let's say you're waiting online, talking to your bank, or and your call is important to us, but it's so important that we keep you waiting for 40 minutes. And then you build this, you can feel unhappiness building up, even more than the residual unhappiness in the background that almost every ego has, that you may not be aware of all the time. But the residual discontent, the residual sense of unease, the residual sense of something missing here, of not having arrived yet, that's always there. No, in addition, there's a more active unhappiness arising. And so why not experiment and say, how would I experience this situation if I did not add any thought to it? If I did not add the baggage of thought to the situation? So that's a highly recommended spiritual practice and an experiment, because you're waiting somewhere, so why not experiment? So how would I experience this if I did not add thought to it? Let's say you are standing in line at the airport. Okay, now I'm not adding any thought to this moment. Okay, you're dropping the baggage of thought. You're not imposing thought. And suddenly you're just standing there, and you're breathing, and you're looking around at people, and yes, the people are standing there, some people are moving there. There are lights, artificial lights, and things there. You're breathing, or suddenly you realize that you're breathing. Oh, I'm breathing. And actually it feels quite good to be breathing. And you might even feel that your body is alive inside. You feel, oh, there's a sense of aliveness in my body. Okay, why do you suddenly feel that, and why is there suddenly a shift in the way in which you experience this situation? It is there because you're not adding unnecessary thought to it. In other words, you're allowing this moment to be as it is. And that immediately brings about an awakening. Then immediately brings about a shift in consciousness. So you become aligned with the present moment. You're no longer antagonistic or hostile towards the present moment. It is as it is. You realize the absurdity of arguing with the isness of this moment. Because it is. So, but the ego thrives and survives on arguing with the isness of this moment. In many situations, this acceptance is enough, and you feel actually quite peaceful in this. But what is this peacefulness that you feel? Where before you were irritated, before you were angry, and suddenly you're not adding thought to it. Now, this is an important thing, which means for a moment, the otherwise compulsive, automatic stream of thinking subsided. You have become present. You have become present, and you're in this presence, you accept what is. So there's what arises when you do not add unnecessary thought to a situation. What arises is a deeper sense of a deeper consciousness, which we could call awareness, which we could call presence. And that deeper consciousness is suddenly there. It was always there, but it got covered up by thinking. It was always there. It was dormant, so to speak. It was only a potential. In that potential is in every human being, but in most human beings it remains dormant. And suddenly something comes up, and you discover, you may not know in that moment that this is what's happening, but you discover the ability to be so aligned with the present moment that you don't need to add conceptual judgment to it. And so there's a momentary gap in the stream of thinking, and that is the key. That gap in the stream of thinking is where you access the deeper, the unconditioned consciousness or the awareness that is there. That's the awakening. The kingdom of heaven does not come with signs to be perceived. You cannot say, oh, it's here, or oh, it's over there. For truly I tell you, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Can also translate it in the midst of you. What is the kingdom of heaven? My translation is different. I don't say kingdom of heaven. Kingdom, in modern terminology, what works better for modern humans is dimension. Kingdom means dimension. And heaven is the sky, the vastness of the sky, which is the closest you can get in the sense-perceived universe to formless consciousness, spaciousness. So heaven is spaciousness. The dimension, kingdom, the dimension of spaciousness. Kingdom of heaven. And where is it? It's within you. What did the Buddha talk about? Emptiness. Better translation, spaciousness. Exactly the same message. Not many people have realized it, because you can only realize that they're talking about the same thing experientially, not through the conceptual mind. Oh, that's amazing. So Jesus pointed to it, try to get there. And then you have a story, there's in Jesus a story where be like a servant waiting for the master to return home, and you don't know at what time the master is going to come. This has been interpreted in various ways, but not in the true ways. How would you be if you were in a house at night, it's very still, and the master, you would need to know when the master is coming. What would your state of consciousness be? You would have to be, because the master is very quiet, you would have to be very alert. So your state of consciousness, if you're sitting in that house waiting for the master to return, would have to be one of alert stillness, which is like this. You can't be thinking, because if you're thinking, your consciousness is absorbed by thinking. You can't be listening. You're not listening anymore. So listening is only one aspect of that. It's the auditory. It's not listening as such, but this presence here flows into listening. Alert listening without labeling, no conceptualization. And what remains then of you is that conscious presence. Same story as I had in the New Earth, the story of the Zen master with a disciple. They're walking in a long pilgrimage, and then they're sitting down for a little picnic, and the disciple of the Zen master has been with him for years, but he still doesn't get it, which is not uncommon. And so he asked the master again, please explain to me, how do I enter Zen? He knows that Zen is a state of consciousness. How do I enter Zen? And the master, instead of giving conceptual explanation, says, can you hear the sound of that mountain stream? And the disciple says, what mountain stream? No, I can't hear it. And the master says, listen more carefully. And so at that moment, the disciple started to listen, and he went, which means, of course, at that moment he stopped thinking. Disciple stopped thinking, and suddenly became very alert. And suddenly said, oh yeah, because it was so distant, you had to be really alert to catch it, that sound. So for a few seconds, the disciple stopped thinking, but not falling below thinking, rising above thinking, alert presence. And then after the disciple said, yes, I can hear it now, the master said, you enter Zen from there. That's the entry point into that state of consciousness that we call Zen. You enter there. And so the disciple was, oh, wow. And so for a few seconds, he remained still. So that was a lesson. And then, of course, the disciple's mind started again. And he said, oh, well, I've been thinking, if I had said I can't hear, if I hadn't heard the mountain stream, what would you have said then? And the master said, enter Zen from there. So this is both Jesus' parable and the Zen story points to that state of consciousness that is presence, and that cannot be explained, and it cannot be understood, because it's beyond concepts. And it's the most important thing in your life, to have that, to realize that, not only occasionally when you sit quietly, no, but bring it into your life through conscious perception. Label less than before. Feel the inner body, the aliveness that pervades the body, that takes attention away from thinking, and this can become an entry point into alert stillness. Even being aware of your breathing can create a little space of no thought. Just one conscious breath is a mini meditation. One conscious breath means you're breathing in and you're breathing out, and you follow with your attention the breath or the air as it moves into the body and it moves out of the body. And if you follow with your attention, you're not thinking, you can't. Buddha recommended the breath awareness meditation already 2,500 years ago, because you cannot be aware of your breathing, really be aware of your breathing and thinking at the same time. So instead of Buddha saying stop thinking, he said, be aware of your breath. Oh, so you have to stop thinking, and automatically you stop thinking. So gaps between thoughts, doing and being, the two dimensions. You are a human being. A human being. Human is the form identity. You are a person with a mind and a history and a body. That's the human. That's fine. We need to honor that dimension also. And you are, more fundamentally, you are a being. And the being is the transcendent dimension in you, is who you are in your essence. And the deeper, the two modalities of knowing, there's the doing, thinking knowledge, and the being knowing. The deeper knowing arises from being. If you only have one dimension in your life, most humans are lost in doing, and there are some humans who may be lost in being. I was for a little while almost lost in being. And then I had to learn to do again. Lost in being would look like that. You just go. The present moment is so beautiful. There's nothing to do and nothing to think. It's just beautiful. What about where you're going to get your food? Well, I don't know. I'm not getting up. I'm not doing anymore. Being is too beautiful. There are very few humans whose destiny it is to go very, very deep into being, so that they almost become incapable of doing. But if you are one of those, I recommend that you move to India. Then at least they won't put you away. They will honor you, and they will feed you. They say. And then perhaps eventually you can come out after a few years. You may start to answer questions. This actually is the story of a famous Indian sage and quite a few sages like Ramana Maharshi. He kind of went completely into being, he was only 16 years old, and he went completely into being and sat at the foot of a temple just for several years. And people would actually feed him. And then gradually he came out and was able to do. And I'm able to do too, but paradoxically, almost all of my doing is associated with showing the way to being. Because that's what the world needs most, because the world is completely out of balance. So I emphasize the being. Every human life of the human entity it goes like a spark of light on the surface of the planet, and it goes. That was it? Yes. On a cosmic scale, this is how you would see a human life. But in that brief spark that arises, something is learned. The one consciousness is undergoing a process of evolution in this dimension. And with each spark, something is learned. And every spark contributes to the growth of consciousness, but no spark has an autonomous existence. It is always connected to the ultimately timeless consciousness, the human consciousness, which is an aspect of the one timeless consciousness. So we are all a spark of the one human consciousness that's evolving. So we are in the middle of this little and then it's gone again, but it doesn't mean anything has been lost in consciousness. Once humanity approaches the end of its evolutionary cycle as separate entities, when it reaches the end, all humans will appear as a single being in the universal consciousness. And this single being, of course, won't have a body. This single being, of course, will not be man or woman. This single being, this single consciousness that has evolved then over a million years, contains the essence identity of all humans that have ever lived. It is basically you. And it will know itself as I, as you. And what its further destiny is, I cannot tell you, but it is connected to the universal consciousness and will contribute and then unite with the universal consciousness. Or before it does that, it may interact with other evolved, highly evolved beings or entities that already exist. And what it does, I have no idea, but I know your destiny is something that you cannot even conceive of through the mind. So this only came to me as an insight, but it's comforting to know that you are actually timeless and you can't die. It's only the temporary appearance of you that disappears. The essence does not. And even and let's not go too far, philosophy. That's coming back to what the practical thing that we need to be concerned with to fulfill our destiny in this lifetime is awakening to who you are and continuing to embody the awakened state so that you can interact with this movie show that is called your life and interact with it, but increasingly not getting entangled in it anymore. And then actually that changes the nature of the movie show too. And it becomes, first of all, more enjoyable because you don't have to demand anymore that something in that movie show should permanently satisfy you. And so when you don't place the demands anymore on those things that continuously arise and pass away around you, you can enjoy them much more. You can enjoy situations as they arise instead of complaining about them because they don't make you completely happy. They don't satisfy you. They were supposed to satisfy me. Well, the situations don't tend to do that. And if they do it for a little while, you get disappointed soon. People, situations, and so on. So the awakened consciousness, see what your relationship is with the movie show of your life and see how it changes in its nature, becomes less frustrating than it was before, because the frustration of living in this world is making demands upon it that it cannot meet. That's frustrating. Make me happy. How much longer until you make me happy? The egoic self says to the world, to people, to situations, places. I'm looking for a place that's ideal, where I can be happy. And of course, occasionally you may think, oh, yeah, I got it now. And then after you stay there for a little while, you discover, oh, I thought this was ideal. It's not. There's no place that's ideal, or every place is ideal. Another wonderful thing you discover as you no longer live exclusively from the level of your personality, but something else shines through the personality, the unconditioned consciousness. You have noticed it here. I mentioned it at the beginning of the retreat. Normally humans are totally conditioned by their upbringing and the culture they grow up in. And when two people from totally different cultures, or sometimes totally different social backgrounds, or whatever it may be, whatever their conditioning may be, religions sometimes. So people have been conditioned either by the surrounding culture, by the religion they grew up in, the particular family environment, all those things that constitute a person's personality. And usually it's the case when you meet people either from totally different social backgrounds, they just can't communicate. You can even go to certain countries in Europe where still stronger divisions between social classes. Then sometimes when you put the so-called, let's say, well, it's beginning to disappear gradually in England too, but there used to be very strong division of classes in England. There was the upper class who talked in a particular way, same language, but talked in a particular way. And then there was the middle class, and there was the lower classes, and they all had their particular way of speaking. To some extent they still have, but more people are going beyond it now. And so you could tell in England when you met somebody, after they opened their mouths, the mind would go, okay, working class. or they will say, oh, that's upper class, or trying to be upper class, but it's not really upper class. And nowadays in England, you get the phenomenon of people who are born into a quite privileged privileged family background, wealthy, and so traditionally called upper class. Now, some of them are pretending to be working class. They put on a false working class accent because they have certain ideas about social justice and so on. But it's a game, and it's quite division between people. And I mentioned at the beginning here, so many people from different countries have come here. And the strange thing is that you probably found, there may be some exceptions, but as a general rule, there was a connectedness that you felt that transcended any kind of conditioning, national, cultural conditioning, religious conditioning, personal conditioning. So, and I mentioned, you might remember at the beginning of the retreat, normally, when two people from totally different cultures meet, it's hard to communicate. A Chinese man meets an American person, a Russian person meets an Italian. What if this? Each person is conditioned by their own culture, but as the spiritual awakening happens, something else, the unconditioned self being emerges through the conditioning, and you can here meet people from other cultures and feel a strong sense of connectedness and not the division. To the extent that, let's say you are American, you will probably let's say you meet a person from Russia, a person from India, a person from Egypt, you may feel a stronger connectedness with that person than with any American who is still totally conditioned by their culture, in whom this awakening has not happened yet. And that's a very interesting thing, that there's something that unites you that is far deeper than the relatively superficial conditioning of your particular culture. And that is the way forward for humanity. It's not to carry inside the divisions that arise through the conditioning by particular cultures or religions, but to transcend that so that the transcendent you emerges, and then the divisions between human beings disappear. And that is you can experience it, have been able to experience it to some extent here. Fall in love, and this is the person that's going to liberate you from your sense of insufficiency and incompleteness. And this is the person that's going to make you happy now for the rest of your life. How wonderful that is. And then you get disappointed. That wasn't supposed to happen. He was meant to make me happy. And so this so-called love suddenly turns around into its opposite. So all that happened was initially the so-called love relationship covered up that feeling of distrust in life, that feeling of lack and insufficiency. And it wasn't removed, it was temporarily covered up. And then when the other person does not behave in the way that he or she was supposed to behave, the feeling re-emerges, and you feel it even more strongly than before. But the mind misinterprets it as meaning that he caused me to have that feeling, or she caused me to have that feeling now, that terrible feeling. But of course the terrible feeling was there before, you just feel it more strongly now because the cover has been removed again. And this basic distrust and unease emerges, and you feel it even more now after having been deceived yourself. So human relationships change fundamentally once you do not look to other humans as a source of finding completion for yourself, or somebody that you actually can place trust in. This is a very important point. And I even remember having looked at 2 or 3 questions on the pieces of paper that I'm still reading. And I even feel inclined to do something on the internet and spend a few hours answering some of these questions. But whether this is going to happen, of course, I don't know. The wonderful thing is you don't, I'll say it again so that it doesn't disappear from your mind. You don't need to trust another human being. It's not necessary. The trust is a state of consciousness, and it's a trust in life. You don't trust that a particular thing is going to happen and so on. You know that all phenomena around you are impermanent and cannot satisfy you. And that is a liberating realization, because then you stop looking to this movie show around you and find something in there that's going to make your sense of self more complete and satisfying. Of course, occasionally things do that, but not for long. So when you don't look at this movie show anymore for satisfaction, personal fulfillment, then you can only not look for it when you are connected with being within. So you begin to enjoy even the fact that things are impermanent. There can be a sense of peace when you contemplate the impermanence of all things. I sound like the Buddha now, but that was a very deep teaching that he gave, and it's still alive now. When you become aware of the impermanence of all things, it's quite amazing. And that can strengthen the sense of beingness within you. The more you watch impermanence, the more you feel something within you that is not touched by that. Consciousness itself, stillness, whatever you want to call it, the timeless being, the timeless you, the timeless deepest essence of who you are, the center of the wheel, is not touched by that. And the more you become aware of impermanence, which to the ego is a fearful thing, oh, don't remind me of death. I don't want to be reminded that I'm going to die one day. Don't be negative. Don't talk to me about that. I don't want to visit a graveyard and walk around and look at the gravestones. That's awful. But it can be a wonderful thing. It can be a deep, suddenly you feel more deeply connected because of the fact of impermanence around you. By becoming aware of impermanence and not running away from it internally, not denying it, facing it fully, that actually will have the effect of strengthening your connectedness with being. And this is the idea, of course, behind that in some Buddhist traditions, the monks go to the morgue and meditate surrounded by dead bodies. Periodically they go there. And, of course, the egoic self, particularly the Western conditioned egoic self, this how morbid, what absurd, why do they do that? It's just absurd, isn't it? If there's a deep reason why they do that, in order to strengthen that connectedness with being, which they call emptiness, and somebody else calls fullness, same place. And so You might have seen, those of you who came to the last retreat, some of you were, or the one before that, I had a spiritual entertainment evening when I showed little clips from video clips. And one video clip was a commercial that was never shown because it was regarded as too shocking. It's a 1 minute thing. It shows a woman giving birth in a hospital, and the baby comes out of her womb and shoots up into the sky, out of the window into the sky. And then the camera follows the baby's flight, goes up first, and as the baby flies up into the sky, the baby, it's a boy, begins to grow already. It grows, it becomes a young man, and then it grows, and then it reaches the highest point, and then the descent starts. Now the baby's no longer a baby, it's a middle-aged man, and gradually the speed increases, and all the time this man is kind of screaming. He goes, and then finally descent. The man has become old, beginning to has lost his hair and his teeth, and then he goes up into he hits the grave, and he's in, and there's a graveyard, and that's the end. So that's basically the story of everybody's life. And to me, that's the most spiritual commercial ever shown. And why is it spiritual? Because it shows you the impermanence and the short-lived nature of a human existence, the human part of it. And if you contemplate that, you go, wow. Wow. And if you don't run away from it internally, don't deny it, you suddenly feel a deeper sense of connectedness. For a long time, I didn't know what this commercial was actually for. And for a long time, I thought it was for beer. Because what it is for is only shown at the very end, because at the very end on the screen you read, life is short. And then it says, play more, and then there's an X. And I thought the X referred to a Mexican beer that has 3 X's, but it's not. It refers to something called Xbox, which is a video game. Apparently. And of course, what it should have said at the end, it did say life is short, but the next sentence should have been, don't waste it playing video games.